Dust rises. Heat burns. The ground shakes with the rhythm of thousands of boots. 40,000 men move together, not in triumph, not in celebration, but in suffering, because before Rome's legions could ever fight, they had to march. And the march was brutal. It broke men long before enemy swords ever touched them. The battles were short. The marching was endless. Imagine a road that stretches beyond sight. The air heavy with dust. The sun like fire on bare skin. Leather straps cutting deep into shoulders. 80 pounds of weight pressing with every step. This was the life of a Roman soldier. From the time of Marius, every legionary carried his world on his back. Weapons, armor, food for days, tools to dig ditches, wooden stakes to build a camp. The generals called them Marius mules, because they bore the weight of empire. The sound of marching boots became Rome's heartbeat, and the smell of sweat, leather, and dust was the scent of her power. Think of a recruit, 17 years old, feet raw, shoulders torn by straps, blisters already bleeding. He looks ahead, and the road never ends. But he cannot stop. He cannot fall, because behind him walks the centurion, and the centurion's vine staff has no mercy. A soldier who cannot march is no soldier at all. Day after day, the march continues. 15 miles, 20 miles, sometimes more, not on smooth stone roads, but through rivers that soak boots, through mountains that tear muscles, through forests that choke men with shadows. And at the end of every day, no rest, no collapsing to the earth. Instead, the command comes, build the camp. Every night, a fortress must rise. Ditches dug, walls raised, stakes planted. Only when the work is finished do men eat. A ration of grain, some cheese if fortune smiles, a sip of sour wine if the gods are kind. The soldier grinds the grain himself on a hand mill he carries. He cooks his own meal, eats with blistered hands. Then he sleeps, knowing the horn will sound before dawn, and the road will call again. This was Rome's greatest weapon, not her swords, not her tactics, but endurance. Enemies could fight Rome in a single battle. Few could match Rome on the march. And yet, not all men survived it. Many collapsed by the roadside. Some were left behind for wolves and crows. Others deserted in the night, slipping into woods, choosing death over another step. And betrayal came, too, from above. Ambitious commanders who promised easy campaigns, only to drive their men across deserts and mountains until exhaustion killed more than the enemy ever could. Think of Crassus, leading his legions into Parthia, through deserts where water was scarce, through sun that burned the flesh from bone. By the time the Parthians struck, Rome's men were already half dead, broken not by steel, but by the march. Every soldier had a breaking point, but Rome knew how to push men past it. Discipline was iron. The vine staff cracked across shoulders, the threat of punishment heavier than the packs on their backs. Fall asleep on guard duty? Death. Lose your place in the line? Flogging. Entire cohorts could be punished by decimation. 1 man in 10 beaten to death by his comrades. Better to march in agony than to face Rome's justice. And so step after step, mile after mile, the legion endured, until the pain itself became a weapon. At the end of the march came the battlefield, and what stood there was not a line of weary men, but stone, hardened by road and labor, sharpened by suffering. When enemies looked upon them, they saw not soldiers but shadows, men who had carried the weight of the world and survived, men who had already faced exhaustion, hunger, and punishment and endured. What enemy could break them now? When the steel clashed, the enemy realized too late. They were not fighting men. They were fighting Rome itself. The battles of Rome are remembered. The marching is forgotten. But it was footsteps, not just swords, that built an empire. Boots grinding down mountains. Boots carving paths through forests. Boots echoing across rivers and deserts. The march was merciless, brutal, unending. But it forged the empire that still haunts us today. So remember, Rome's true triumph was not in fighting. It was in marching. The sun sets, but the suffering does not. The march is over, but the work has only begun. A Roman soldier never truly rests. As the last horn echoes across the hills, orders rise above tired voices, build the camp. And so the men, broken from 20 miles on the road, lift shovels, pickaxes, and stakes. Their bodies scream for rest. But Rome does not listen. The ground is torn apart. Ditches are carved into the earth. Walls rise from sharpened stakes. Every night, a fortress must be built from nothing. This was not luxury. This was survival. Because every soldier knew the enemy could strike at any time. A careless camp was a grave. Look at them. Thousands of men digging side by side. Sweat running down scarred faces. Hands bleeding, muscles trembling. And yet the work never stops. The centurions pace with cold eyes. The vine staff ready to lash any man who dares to slow. It does not matter if you're wounded. It does not matter if you're starving. The camp must rise. And when finally the last stake is hammered into the ground, only then food. But food was no feast. A handful of grain, a crust of bread, maybe cheese if fortune smiled, sometimes a bit of sour wine. The soldier carried a small hand mill in his pack. He ground his own grain, cooked his own meal, ate with dirt-caked hands. There was no servant, no slab, only himself. This was Rome's secret. Her soldiers were not pampered nobles. They were laborers, builders, grinders of stone and men. And then, after eating in silence, came the watch. Night was divided into shifts. Some men slept. Others stood guard, eyes straining in the dark, hands gripping cold spears. Every shadow a threat. Fall asleep? Death. For one careless soldier could doom an entire legion. And so the night passed, not in peace, not in comfort, but in vigilance, until the horn sounded once more. Before dawn, men rose. The camp was torn down, every stake pulled, every ditch filled, the earth left bare, as if no army had ever stood there. And then the road again. Another day, another march, another camp to build when the sun fell. This was the rhythm of empire. Walk, build, eat, guard, tear down, walk again. No glory, no rest, only survival. It was not the battles that wore down Rome's enemies. It was this endless grind, the hammer of exhaustion, the anvil of discipline. And in this furnace, men were turned into iron. The soldiers of Rome did not just fight wars. They carried them. They built them. They lived inside them. And in the silence of night, as they stared at the stars above the camp walls, every man wondered the same question. How much longer can I endure? The march breaks the body. The camp breaks the spirit. But there was still another enemy, one more cruel than any barbarian with a sword. Hunger, cold, and fear. A Roman soldier ate little. Grain, a crust of bread, a thin soup made from whatever scraps could be found. Meat was rare. Fresh fruit? Almost never. Water could be foul, drawn from rivers choked with mud and disease. And yet he had to fight. He had to march. The body wasted away slowly. Cheeks hollowed, eyes darkened, bones pressed against skin. Still the horn blew. Still the boots struck the earth. But hunger was only one enemy. There was sickness, camp fever, dysentery, plague. In winter, the burning agony of frostbite. A man could be marching one day and buried in a shallow ditch the next. There were no hospitals, no comfort, only the cold hand of fate. And for the unlucky, death was not mercy. Because Rome had punishments worse than sickness. Discipline was everything. It was the steel spine of the legion. And it was merciless. Disobey an order? You were flogged. Steal from a comrade? You were stoned. Fall asleep on watch? Execution. And if an entire unit failed in courage, Rome's most terrible punishment awaited. Decimation. The soldiers gathered in silence. Every 10th man was chosen by lot, and then beaten to death, not by the enemy, not by strangers, but by his own brothers. The message was clear. Rome feared weakness more than death, and yet somehow they endured. Imagine the mind of a legionary. He marches 20 miles. He builds a fortress. He eats a handful of grain. He stands guard in the freezing dark. He watches his friends collapse. He fears the whip of the centurion. He hears the screams of punishment. And still, he rises at dawn. What kind of man survives this? What kind of army thrives on this? The answer is simple. An army unlike any other. An army built not on strength alone, but on suffering. When the battle finally came, Rome's enemies saw men standing in iron ranks. But they did not see the truth. They did not see the thousands of miles walked. They did not see the nights of hunger. They did not see the silent tears shed in darkness. All they saw were soldiers. But Rome knew better. What stood before them were not mere men. They were survivors, shadows hardened by endless labor, ghosts of flesh and bone who had already endured more than death itself. How could any barbarian hope to break them now? And so Rome conquered, not only with swords, not only with generals, but with footsteps, with sweat, with agony. Every mile on the road was a victory. Every camp raised was a fortress of discipline. Every soldier who endured became a stone in the foundation of empire. Rome's enemies saw her legions and trembled, but they never truly understood. The empire was not forged in glorious battles. It was forged in hunger, in disease, in punishments, in endless, merciless marching. And when night fell on the empire, when centuries passed and the legions were gone, the echo of their boots remained. Listen closely. You can still hear it. The rhythm of thousands of feet pounding roads into history. The brutal march of Rome. The march that built an empire. The march that never ended.